So, welcome, Paige. We appreciate you being here today. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Hey, everyone. I'm Coach Paige, as I'm known, Paige Fleischmann. I've been a movement specialist for over 13 years. Basically, it's a combination of strength training and also mobility. I've kind of done this as a post college endeavor. I was always an athlete growing up. My mom put me in many, many sports. I had such high energy that was probably the best outlet for me. And post college is when I really realized just how much exercise movement really fueled me, and more so from even just a well being standpoint. It's always a place that I've turned to in terms of when I'm having maybe not the best of days. It just seems like getting my body moving has always made me feel a little bit better. So, I've been coaching all kinds of people in this realm in terms of young teenagers all the way up to 65, 70 plus people. I've worked with professional athletes for a few years in the world of LPGA, PGA, and the MLB. But most recently, I'm working a lot more just with some of the demographics of some people here in Arizona, and I've been continuing my education across those years as well too. I'm a real nerd when it comes to wanting to learn anything and everything that has to do with the body. So I've invested thousands of dollars every year. I always have a small budget that I dedicate towards my continuing education. And that's really fueled me to understand the body more intimately, especially from nervous system to hormones and just everything that kind of goes into overall health and vitality. And I like to tell people that movement is just the lens at which I kind of enter into helping people feel better, move better, and look better.
Yeah, and I know recently you've been working a lot with menopause women. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I myself just turned 40 this last summer. And I know that one thing that probably even fueled me is my mom having her own health concerns. And so I got really interested in this topic a few years ago, but more recently, I kind of just feel like that population of individuals isn't well served. It doesn't seem like, at least not, even from things that my aunts tell me and my mom, it's just like there was not a lot of education or information for women that are going through this phase of their life. And because I am now entering very close to that phase, I personally am interested in this topic and have been really trying to sort of target towards individuals that are going through this phase. And it's just really because you see a lot of women that they just have a lot of uncertainty. They don't really know where to start for the most part. You sometimes you tell me if you've heard this, you go to the doctor and they're saying, "Oh, you should just work out or you need to exercise." And it kind of like you might leave there going, "Well, where do I start or where do I go?" Or how many times did I hear a woman or a client say, "I feel really intimidated going to the gym, not really sure what to do." And so that's how they end up a lot of times in front of me, or even for the matter that I've also been a yoga instructor and kind of involved in the yoga community for probably 15 years. And you see a lot of women that have joint pain and sometimes joint dysfunction or joint issues. Sometimes they, even in the yoga community, they don't really want to talk about it, realizing that they might need to do something to adjunct, and maybe just yoga isn't the only answer that there is.
Mhm. This whole passage into menopause is really riddled with body composition changes, in particular weight gain, and definitely, a reduction in lean body mass. So, from a perspective of that, just starting with that as our foundational topic, can you give us some hope, Coach Page, about how we can understand that yes, that's what's happening, but there are lots of things that we can do, in particular with fitness. And can we start with that subject?
Yeah. Number one, I think I always want to empower people to realize that you are not the scale, that what it says, that number doesn't really define who you are. That being said, the scale, or at least a traditional one, unlike maybe some of these electronic ones that we have access to now, they don't give us the whole picture anyway. It's really only you against gravity that you're understanding. So if I step on the scale today and it says 140 pounds, of what? What we need to understand the more in-depth composition. So the electronic scales we have now is great because we can see how much skeletal muscle mass We can look at water. We can understand sort of the whole thing that makes us up. So the number one thing is don't give so much energy to just that one particular number. It only gives you one data point. And number two, let's also remember that we are constantly bombarded by, I think, poor imaging of what health looks like. Again, here in America, we tend to see in the magazine covers and models of this, very sort of, even, in my opinion, sometimes even malnourished looking, too skinny, not enough sort of muscle tone. And I think that we forget that if you look at like Roman statues from like, ancient times, these women were actually voluptuous. They were muscular. There's just part of this that we want to still remember, that you're a real human. But when we talk about wanting to be toned, right? We want to be able to have like beautiful curves. You got to have muscle, you need to have muscle. There's no way you're going to be able to see the definition of my bicep if I don't have a bicep. So sometimes we can lose weight, or more specifically, we can lose fat. But if we don't have very much muscle underneath that fat, then we may still appear like we don't have that kind of nice curvature or tone, say to the glutes or the butts or the leg, because that's where really muscle reigns supreme. And that's where truly resistance training and strength training is kind of going to be your best friend for that matter.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, it's interesting because I'm thinking about the difference between a woman of reproductive age. You're going to train her differently than you would train someone, let's say, in perimenopause or menopause in particular, because a lot of these women are coming already, maybe even their late 30s, early 40s, potentially having some of this joint pain, like you're talking about. How would you look at that woman differently than, say, somebody who's 28 or 32?
Um, Definitely the difference is I'm a little bit more privy to wanting the perimenopausal woman, or the woman that's slightly older, to have a lot more collaboration with me. I think there's a more needing to kind of educate and talk about, like, how does this feel in your body and where do you feel that? I think sometimes with the younger population, when they still are of, say, this reproductive age, you can kind of push them a little bit more, and kind of take charge a little bit and be like, you got this, let's just do this. We can load them up a little bit better. But when we're dealing with sometimes joint issues, there can be a lot more just stabilization, core base, maybe training that needs to be more of the foundation that we need to start with. And being able to even do, say, what's called an isometric, and being able to hold and like stabilize in a position for an extended period of time. That way, your body has enough time to recognize that what's happening is a good stimulus as well, that it feels okay on the joints when you're doing it too. And that's why I think, again, I would just be wanting to look at how hydrated you are, and taking into consideration how is your sleep, where's your mood today, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's like meeting the person more where they're at when we are in these other stages of our life. I think there's a lot more care and compassion with that. Whereas, like, I can be a little bit more the drill sergeant, with maybe somebody's a little bit younger, and be like, there really should be not too much that should be stopping that young person, versus we might just need to take a little bit more of like, careful over the speed bump as we go through menopausal hormonal changes, hopefully with a secondary professional that can give me a little bit more markers, so that we have a better idea of what we're working with. And if given that it can take them a longer period of time, what I try to do is hopefully let them realize, like, it got to set expectations a little bit more, and realize that, like, this will not be something that's for the short term. We want to look at it for the long term. We want to be able to give that person even something, some sort of homework that they can be doing outside of maybe the training room as well too, so that they're working on it a little bit more frequently, versus, again, at someone of more reproductive age, where they could hit the gym 2 times a week and be seeing results fairly quickly. Whereas this stage, it's just going to take more time, and hopefully it's a bit about being, again, a cheerleader and saying, not, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep trying and keep going forward.
Yeah, and it is totally possible to build muscle and lots of good tone as you get older. But like you're saying, with the menopause phase, we do find from that physiological perspective, it does take a bit longer than it would, 20 years prior to that. You can build muscle, but I think it's important to find someone you can work with on a consistent basis. And if it is available to you to work with someone, it's a great opportunity to form a relationship and also figure out what's going to work for that particular person. Because we do know that later stage, it does take a little bit more effort, time and effort to put that muscle on, that muscle
And
mass.
that's where I think education comes into play because it depends on what baselines or markers are people using to even understand the process. Like it takes burning 3,500 calories. It's going to take that much calorie burn to burn 1 pound of fat. Giving more information up front too, so that they can um, practice having patience is probably a key component to that as well too. Not wanting to throw in the towel just because 3 months into it you're not seeing maybe the results that you want. It really does. It really can take a lot more time, but that consistency and patience comes into play.
Yeah, and just to tell everyone, I actually see Paige, and I thought this was going to be like a 6 week relationship. I thought, oh, I'll go in and I'll just work with her for a little bit, and then I'll be fine and I'll be on my own. And then 18 months later, I was so happy with the way that I was feeling and the way I looked and muscles and man, you just can't even articulate it until you're there. But I would say I was surprised about the way my body felt like in terms of strength. It's one thing, muscles, yeah, that's cool. The aesthetic piece, that's, maybe 10%, 20%, depending on the person, right? But to feel that strength in your body, where you walk tall and you have that confidence when you walk into a room, this is not just about having a routine and working out. There's so much more behind strength training and building your body and movement, like all of the different exercises you do for balance and to make that experience for someone to feel fantastic in their body. Can you talk a little bit more about just like a little bit more even outside the gym and how those things are important?
I think maybe even to your point, if we are strengthening, say, the muscles of the back, that can have an effect on my posture. And then, of course, when my posture changes, that actually does change my chemistry in terms of my emotions. Because if you look at me now, as I sink my chest down and look down to the floor, you're reading my body language, and that reading is like somebody who doesn't feel secure or confident. Your posture has an effect on your emotions, and your emotions have an effect on your posture. So I literally just had a client last week say that her daughter was very impressed by the fact that her mom was starting to like bleed confidence. She was, Mom, your back, you just look so strong, and your posture, it's so great. And this woman's already kind of a happy woman. So it was hard to think about like how she could exude even more joy. But you see it in the small moments. The comments I get from clients are something simple like going up and down my stairs is now, gosh, I didn't even realize actually how winded I was getting, or picking up that laundry basket. I did it the way you told me, Paige, and I actually felt like I could do it 3 more times. And so there can be so much carryover. The building of strength starts to empower you in other activities. You might even be saying yes to like, oh, my girlfriend called and said she wanted to go stand up paddleboarding. And I was like, gosh, I don't know if I would have said yes to that a year ago. But you see how you start reaching out and actually wanting to involve yourself in more social engagements, or maybe just generally more activities with the family. And that is where that's having that emotional effect on creating more of that vitality and that sense of well being, and that you want to go after stuff because it's giving you the energy that you want as well.
So we've got some case studies that we are really excited about. So in particular, we have one lady, actually, she's menopausal. She's in her late 50s. And she came to me originally with a lot of joint pain, kind of melancholy, not quite depression, but just not feeling like herself. And we got her hormones balanced. And after, I don't know, maybe 2 months or so, she was ready to go and see Coach Paige. So I sent her to work out with her, and she has just really blossomed. And so, can you tell a little bit of the story about the changes that you've seen with her? 'Cause you mentioned something about her workouts, but then she was extrapolating that and taking that to a whole other level once she was out of the gym.
Yeah, it was interesting. Took me a little bit more time, several sessions in to get more of a picture of what her life was like maybe before, but she's kind of a great person just because she really likes the educational component. She liked knowing kind of like what we were doing and why. And she just had this one hip thing where because she actually drives stick shift. So her two hips are a little wonky. So we're kind of highlighting the fact that because she's always driven a car and having to do this thing with her hips back and forth, some of the exercises that are actually alleviating some of her kind of hips, I'd call it more discomfort at this point, especially because she does have to sit for long periods at work. um, but it almost seemed like in the first few weeks, she just was always coming to the session so excited. And partially what happened too is I showed her an exercise that she could do, and you could see how there was a little bit of like trepidation or concern. And I just kept saying, no, I know you can do this. Maybe I don't know exactly how many reps, but I know that you can do this. And we're going to start with this and here and now. And so then we kept doing that over several weeks. And then sure enough, um, she told me that she actually has a friend that teaches step class. And so she started going to like this step aerobics class. And then next thing you know, she said she went to like a spin class. And I think it was even just the other week. And I was like, wait a second, how many like different exercise activities are you doing now? I had given her the homework of doing 20, 30 minutes of cardio a couple times a week outside of our sessions just to get her in the zone of doing something somewhat on the daily. And then it just seemed like she blossomed like a fast flower. It's almost like she just needed someone else to tell her that she was capable and ready. And
Mhm.
that was like the green light for her to go ahead and start initiating, getting involved, like I said, in more activities, and partially some of it being a social experience too, wanting to engage with friends and
Yeah.
see people outside of work. She's lost at least over 5 pounds. And that may not seem like a lot, but again, she kind of started slow. We only see each other once, maybe sometimes twice a week. And she's really only been training with me now for like 2 months. So that really only equates to probably 10 sessions at this point. So while that's not a lot, again, that's definite progress in terms of
Yeah.
women can lose maybe half a pound to maybe a pound a week. And again, it depends on, are you in menopause or you not? So that's going to fluctuate. But I would definitely say that she gravitated towards the idea that someone else told her that she could and she was capable. And because one of her other markers was wanting to spend more time with her granddaughter, I believe. But when she went to go visit, when she came back from that trip, and she was like, to be able to like get down on the floor and get up and go for walks and play with her and actually have the energy to do so, that was enough for her to just keep pushing forward. That was just the thing that really was like, okay, I enjoy this a lot because of now the things that I am capable outside of the training room.
Exactly, and that's a good point about weight, um, and weight loss, because what we see a lot in perimenopause and even in a lot in menopause as well is these spikes of cortisol, because it's stressful going through the menopause transition. You know, you're up one day, you're down another. A lot of times you don't know if you're coming or going, so it can be very stressful. Now, 2 weeks ago, we were in week 1 and we did a whole week on stress management. So that was a really good foundation to start with. And then last week, we talked about nutrition. And now I specifically saved strength training and fitness and movement for week 3 because I feel like building that foundation is really important. So a lot of people, a lot of women that come to me and then come to you, they are definitely talking about this kind of resistant belly fat that just won't go. So when we are looking at it from a movement point of view and glycogen storage and all that, can you kind of walk us through why movement is so important in order to address that?
Definitely. Well, again, glycogen can be stored in the muscles, and the only way to release that fat is to get moving. You need to be contracting the muscles, you need to be using them. Walking is great, and I would definitely encourage anyone to even utilize the idea of right after you get done eating, going for a walk will stimulate that just enough to get that underlying layer and to get things going. Um, a lot of some of the stuff I do is compound movements, multi-jointed movements, doing stuff that's a little bit more complex where you're using the whole body. So for instance, sometimes people just want to do like some simple bicep curls, and that's fine. And you can do that, and that'll stimulate the one little area of your arm. But if you're really going after wanting to get rid of these stores that you have, then doing more complex movement, full body of movements are going to be great. And again, walking's okay, but sometimes doing something that either stimulates the heart rate a little bit more, gets you walking a little bit faster. So even if that's just picking like going up a hill or going for a hike, doing intervals on the bike, or again, strength training, resistance training, especially lower body, because women are a little bit stronger. We've got bigger hips. We just have more muscle mass and larger bones in the lower half of our body. So really working with the legs and doing stuff that's going to strengthen and move the lower half of the body is going to help us release some of those stores and make sure that stuff doesn't sit around. And like I said before, you stimulate your lymphatic system and get everything moving. The way that we do that is through movement of all the joints through many planes of motion, not just a one direction sort of movement.
So, for those people who are not yet at a place where they could potentially hire a strength trainer, a one on one kind of scenario, they feel like they would like to see someone in person and they don't have anyone in their area. Do you have some other recommendations for things that women can do in lieu of that, or just to kind of get a similar experience, but also keeping in mind maybe the starter person or the person who's been doing, cardio since the 80s, that kind of thing, like where can we take both the starter person and then that second person?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one, even if you're not sure of cost or budget, think of it as like an investment for yourself. But if for some reason that investment still seems a little too high priced, don't be afraid to ask about partner training. Usually, most people will kind of keep the price relatively the same, but the idea is that you share the cost with the second person. So then that pretty much puts it at 50%. Tons of places these days offer small group training, as it's called, or better known as maybe even semi private training. Usually, you're going to see four to maybe upwards of six people
Hmm.
in a small group, but it's more set up like uh, private custom one-on-one style training where the program that's being built for you is more customized and they can offer little modifications for each person. It's just not in a super large class.
What about, let's say there's like one of these standard fitness places, like a $25 a month gym, and they happen to offer one of those, what is it, Les Mills fitness classes where there's like 35 or 40 people. Do you think that's a good place to start?
I would say no. Number one, if you're new to weightlifting, it's not set up for beginners. I think most of the people in there already kind of have a good understanding of what they're doing. I have heard individuals maybe hurt a shoulder. So it's not where I would send a beginner. And usually those classes are also going to make you work at a little bit quicker rate where a lot of things are done for time. And so you're kind of doing lots of reps for time. And that's not really the true science of strength training. Reps are usually done a little bit slower. And there's always going to be a rest period in between what's called a set. So if you do 10 reps of something, for strength training principles, you need to allow yourself 1 to 2 minutes of that rest break for that ATP to be built back up. Um, that being said, yeah, I wouldn't recommend large group format classes. And 20, 30 people is not really going to be a good entry point. And most of these places should be offering very discounted sessions. And by the way, a simple Google search for menopause and strength training, you might even find Dr. Is it Stacy Sims? I think is her name. She
Yeah.
even offers programs starting at say $300, where it's a digital formatted given to you, and then you take that program and you can go then do it. So there's a lot of different ways where you can still be taught with budget in mind through the use of the internet, through videos, through video demonstrations, and still getting all your sort of coaching needs.
Hmm. Now, speak to that lady who has been doing a lot of cardio or maybe even hit training, and she's on that the orange theory. That's a big one that a lot of people come to me, and their cortisol's through the roof. They're not really losing weight because they're balancing it with all that cortisol. So, what's going on for that lady, and why might she want to kind of shift gears at this point?
Well, I think you mentioned this a little bit before because you guys have already had a whole chapter where you've talked about stress and stress management. If
Yeah.
you're jumping into a group fitness class or say, even let's pick on Orange Theory a little bit, once again, these things, they're going to make you do stuff quickly and you're going to be doing it for time. And then it's time to move to the next station. So now what's happening is especially if you're going to be mouth breathing. And I won't quite get into that, but mouth breathing is going to induce more cortisol. And so now what's happening is the exercise really isn't becoming very beneficial for you. It's moving at a pace that's usually a little bit too fast. And if you've been doing those classes where in Orange Theory, again, you can see how many calories you're burning. It's kind of like what I said about the scale before. That's only one data point. Do we need to get into post-exercise oxygen consumption? Whenever you do strength training the way that it's meant to be done with rest periods in between sets, your metabolism is going to be revved for a longer period of time after you finish. So while let's say 30 minutes of jogging might burn you 300 calories, 30 minutes of strength training will actually burn more than just the 300 in that 30-minute time window because you're going to continue, quote, burning calories and you're putting money in the bank of having muscle and building muscle and keep building muscle, which burns more calories in the
It's
long
the
run.
gift that keeps on giving all day.
So that's where it gets just a little bit challenging. You'll see with some of these sort of group fitness classes is that they're kind of predicating on these terms and these words like burn lots of calories and lose weight. And they're still kind of peddling, in my opinion, outdated methods. The tried and true really exists by getting sort of the custom approach and really going through strength protocols as they do in, say, the real world of athletes and professional players. They lift according to how it's supposed to be. And they'll probably tell you they're not in there doing, 15, 20 reps in a 30-second period unless they're in power phase of their development program. So
And when you say doing that is gonna put you in more of a sympathetic state, make you
exactly.
more anxious, more exhausted at the same time?
That's why it's always hard to discern, when sometimes when I have clients, I kind of ask them a series of questions to get a gauge of maybe where they're at for the day. Because if they are running in this high sympathetic tone, we're going to probably start off with some sort of stress reduction and try to bring it down a little bit. Maybe that day is more appropriate for something like a yoga, meditation, or some light stretching or easy movement or
Yeah.
gameplay to engage their brain more so and not really tax the body because you can't rob from an empty bank anyway. And so this is again where it's like exercise is meant to be more of what's called a hormesis. It's supposed to be a good stress for the body, but there's certainly lots of modalities out there that kind of bastardize it and sort of manipulate it in a way that actually creates the not so good effects, if you will. And again, they're not like huge, and I don't want to scare anyone away from that. But we live in an age where we just have to be pretty discerning at times, and it can take a little bit more research or being willing to invest in yourself and not looking at it so much as this costs this, but it's you putting money in the bank for future Paige, for future Heather. It's really when you make the decision to think about how your 70 and 80-year-old self is going to feel about that decision today,
Yeah, is
rather than
she in a nursing home or is she at home independent? That's something you wanna consider, and it sounds like a joke, but I'm not joking. I'm serious as a heart attack. But one thing I wanna mention again about my experience with you is coming into a space like you provide, you hold a container for that person, as you said, meeting them where they are, and then carefully guiding them up from there. What I notice the most, well, a couple things. I want to just make a couple comments. The ability to have this really amazing, powerful self awareness. We've had a couple of virtual sessions too, and you've been able to do that with me. Like that shoulder needs to come back a little bit further. Are you breathing? And you're pinpointing those areas that need to be turned on or turned off. And so I really think that's a valuable tip. And you might lose a lot of that if you're in one of these bigger classes, because I think that protects us from injury. One of the things that was happening to me, which is why I was seeking someone, is I was sort of that type A, get it done. I got to work out. I got to get this done. It's like in between dances, just go do this. And then I would overachieve. Like, I'm just going to do 5 more. And then I would tweak my neck or twist my back too hard and it didn't really feel like it in the moment. But then that night or even the next morning, you're waking up and you're like, oh, and then what happens? You're out for 3 weeks. And then I feel like it was after the 5th or 6th time that I did that over the course of like a year. I'm like, you know what? No more. And not only that, but I would be exhausted at the end of a workout because I would overdo it. So the difference that I felt, the quality was that I do a workout and instead of feeling exhausted after a workout, you're supposed to feel good. You're supposed to feel energized. And I thought, well, maybe it's just me, before coming to work out with you, like maybe it's just me. Like there's something wrong with me. Like I get way too tired. No, it's because I was overdoing it. Probably too much of this, not enough of this, not enough of the breathing, and kind of like the orange theory, and I put myself in this sympathetic state, cortisol off the wall. And then, of course, you're exhausted at the end. But what you put together is this nice package where you are getting a little bit of everything, and I think that is really that secret sauce, that special ingredient that you provide. And it's like, I don't know how many trainers do that. I'm not sure. I know you're a movement specialist, but I still consider you my trainer. But the point is, there is really something to that, just like that magic ability to do that. It is something I want to highlight about the way that you put things together for your protocols. Yeah.
That's especially with the massage program I'm currently involved in. My approach is very client centered. It's really about wanting to understand you, how you learn, and what's going to work in terms of making sure that you're interested and that you're enthralled to what you're doing. It's not about like me and what I want to do. I mean, of course, there's things I want to do with you, but I mean, it's about learning your body and how you're going to adapt to the exercise, and that's going to fuel you to want to come back more and more. And hopefully, then what you're learning from that process is that, again, this can be enjoyable and I can actually learn something and that it is empowering and it's not something that robs from me. Cause again, we in a society where somehow more is better, more is not always better, more calories, but do it faster. I would say those are like my two like nemesis is do it faster or do more of it. That's like almost sometimes the opposite. You can actually get a lot achieved when you do, once again, high loads and less reps. I think when you find a professional that really understands how to make sure that you and your well-being and how you're feeling about the movement or the exercise and everything is actually more important than whatever they have on the quote agenda, or if they have a power trip about it, be one tip, be willing to fire someone.
Or say no. If something that you're doing hurts, I've done that when I just kept doing it. That was many, many years ago, but I remember and I hurt my back. So by all means, if something is hurting or doesn't feel right intuitively, you feel it in your gut, you just have the courage to say no. And I think I'm going to pass on that one. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get a little nervous to say no, send the food back, or whatever. But I would definitely empower you that, once again, think about it from the perspective of this is an investment for yourself. Then be willing to take your time to find the professional that really does understand what your goals are or might have experience in the perimenopausal or menopausal space. And also know that, I know we've talked a little bit now about concern about getting hurt, injuries. There's so many more physical therapists that are weaving strength training into their um, business practices to now, where you can find professionals that literally can deal with that on the spot. Which is, I do that as well too, right? I do kind of weave in this sort of rehab, sort of prehab methodology within my programming because I've spent many many years studying the body. But now you have access to people that actually can quite literally deal with frozen shoulder or plantar fasciitis very easily and still be able to weave in the training that goes along with that too. And that's why I said before, I'm doing massage therapy so that I can be able to do a lot more soft tissue manipulation and mobilization. Again, I know that plantar fasciitis
And
is
frozen shoulder are very common in menopause. Very
the most common in the soft tissue. They're not that hard to honestly treat. You just need to know a little bit more, but they're very easy to work through. It takes a little bit of yeah, added knowledge in order to tackle that. I would never want that to be a crutch to not get something started.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have a big virtual practice as well because people are looking to see you when they're out of town or maybe they've moved. And so you started this whole process, before whatever 2020, people probably thought this is crazy. I would never see a trainer or a coach or anything like that online. But now it's become commonplace and it seems to be really working out for you. So, can you tell people if they would like to reach out to you and talk about maybe doing some virtual sessions? How might they go about doing that?
Visiting my website, www.infinityhealthcoach.com or infinityhealthcoach@gmail.com, sending me an email saying that you saw my talk here with Heather today. The online space is such an easy way in terms of if you live at a distance, if time is a concern, like in terms of just driving and leaving your home or something like that. a lot of people have found even just as simple as getting started is logging in at 7 a.m., you and I, just like this, virtual. All you need usually is a few pieces of equipment, very easy to get your hands on, low cost investment that you can even get like a stability ball, a few bands to have at home. A easy way to sort of start weaving it into your day. If you are a busy woman that still works and provides for her family, that sometimes is a little bit easier entry point than saying having to drive somewhere that might take 15, 20 minutes and you're there for an hour and then come home, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. And hopefully, not quite yet, but in the future too, being able to offer even like a one-time purchase program. So 12 weeks to get your strength training foundations specifically for this age bracket for the perimenopause or menopausal woman. That's something that I'll be working on towards the end of the year. So it's not quite ready yet. But again, that's going to bring it to more of that affordability level where you can self-pace from home with the idea of having video demonstrations and kind of a breakdown of all the exercises and tutorials that you would need in case you are a beginner.
And I know that you're offering our audience a complimentary call. Is that right?
Yes, complimentary consultation. I think it's really important just having an initial conversation, getting to know one another. That's really where that's a good time to actually try to discern whether or not we will be a good fit. And it could be something that you could see yourself doing and working with me in the future. I always want to make sure that it is very much a collaborative effort. So I do think that just having a 30-minute conversation, giving me more an idea of like where you're at and what your goals are and all that, is really beneficial before because the first session, it would be an actual assessment, right? Most people these days are going to do a general assessment of how your joints are currently moving. What does your movement pattern look like? That's the only way that they can actually even structure a quality program. I know some people that offer a free first session. You're not going to come into me and just work out the first day. That
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. It's like I explain that to people in terms of whenever you have something wrong with your car and you take it to the mechanic, they have to take it through diagnostics. They've got to look under the hood and actually get an orientation of what's going on. That way they can tell you how much the repair is, how long it'll take, and what it
Right.
entails. And that's why I would say, again, if you find a good professional, they should be able to do a general assessment. They should be testing your strength in the beginning and taking you through a series of these movement assessments so that they have a better understanding how to build that program out.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes total sense. And what does a blueprint look like for you? I know depending on the person and how advanced they are, or how long they've been working with you, that's going to evolve and change and all that. But let's say the typical 48-year-old perimenopausal woman, she's coming in, she's still having a menstrual cycle, but she's really going through it. She's having night sweats, she's not sleeping as well, doesn't have a ton of energy, and she is maybe having a little brain fog and even a little anxiety and depression because of those two things. So she's coming in to you. Hopefully, we've already gotten her hormones, balanced because that's a big booster to get to you to start working out. But regardless, she comes into you. And what's a good kind of starting point and a blueprint for where she might evolve to?
We're going to start with basically foundational exercises, foundational movements. And exercise, again, is a very broad umbrella, right? So, to be more specific, I'm going to categorize it maybe into like three main buckets. When that woman's coming in, especially specifically to see me, the prioritization of the strength training, resistance training will be number one. Um, that being said, you're going to focus on foundational movements, a squat, a lunge, a lat pull down, maybe a chest press. The reason why I name those particular exercises is because those work on large muscle groups. I'm not talking about little, smaller biceps, smaller deltoids, or even some of our hip muscles. Core training is great, but that's not going to burn as many calories. It's not really going to build the muscle and actually get it to get larger, if you will. That being said, even if she's feeling kind of low energy for the day, you can focus on two exercises. Again, let's say a lat pull down for your big back muscles, and then maybe just some simple lunges. Maybe that workout is a little bit shorter, more like just a very condensed, focused 30-minute workout. I would say there's your big rock, and doing that a minimum of twice a week. That is the minimum. Um, that being said, we would definitely be working on stuff, or it's not complex movement that would require a lot of thinking. So if it's kind of like computing in the brain, it's not, again, making it kind of simple. There's not a lot of coaching that's really required with that. Um, the second bucket is then sometimes a lot of people ask about like yoga and Pilates and things like that. And that's great. And that can still help joints, especially if you currently are maybe in some sort of inflammation response. That would be something that you could do once, maybe twice a week. Your big rock is going to still be the strength training. And then the third rock is then also trying to weave in what's an activity that's involves movement, something that brings pleasure and joy, and most of all, hopefully gets you outside, because we know how much exposing ourselves to the outdoors also helps to boost our mood. And usually when you can do that, you can also involve your social network, your friends, your family. And that too, I think, lends to the reason why someone can go out and play soccer and have a good old time and not feel like their ankle hurts. Because I've literally had people do movements where they've kind of forgotten about, quote, the pain, because we were engaging in something that was more task oriented. Throw the ball, see if you can get it through the hoop. That actually almost creates a little bit of distraction. Plus, you're having fun. Plus, you're interacting with people. And so I feel like between strength, a little bit of like stretchy yoga ish something, and then something that's activity driven, but more social engagement, especially outdoors, those are going to be like your three buckets. How I would want to build it out in terms of like, looking at the week at a glance. I want to be doing my 2 times a week strength training, 30 minutes minimum, another day in there built in to do something a little bit more restorative that just mobilizes and moves the joints through the range of motion. And then something that's actually fun that makes me want to get up and go do it. We live here in Arizona, so we're a little bit lucky to have a lot of sunshine. But I mean, I own a stand up paddleboard, I have a bicycle, I own rollerblades, I have friends that like to go hiking. And there's just so many different ways I think that you can engage in some sort of social activity that's not just going to a restaurant to sit down, not just going to a bar to have a glass of wine or what have you. Like anything that involves not sitting down, I think is kind of the ideal situation.
And, I like what you said about activities and the balance and, being agile and all that kind of thing, because there are roughly 350,000 hip fractures every year. Most are in women. And the majority of those have happened from a fall, right? And somebody has fallen because maybe their balance isn't so good. Or that, as to your point, they don't have those muscles hugging the bones because they're sarcopenic. As that lean body mass starts to get lower and lower and lower as we get older, we got to fight back for it. So if you're not engaging in these activities that are building that muscle around the bone, teaching you to be agile, and it's not just about just standing there lifting a weight, like Coach Paige is saying, it's really important that you're doing things on one foot or one leg. You're really making sure that you have great balance and that you're training both sides of the body, because one side generally, in my case, definitely the left side was weaker. And so we're always focusing in a different way on that side. But just to give you some statistics about fractures, the rate of hip fracture among women begins to increase at age 50, and then it doubles every 5 years, reaching nearly 50% in women age 90. And, if you're 45, you might think, okay, that's like another lifetime away. But if you think about it from, you're stratifying this risk, you're looking at it's every 5 years, it's getting a little bit more and a little bit more. So, like, today is the day. Carpe diem. Don't wait for another year or 5 years. This is something you want to be doing today for your longevity. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the thing that in terms of the reason why I like to be called Coach Page, is because it is about coaching the person about expectations and reality. And most of the individuals that I work with know upfront that I'm not here to help them in a short term. We are
Right.
in the long game, and that you even spoke to that before, that you thought this was going to be kind of a short term investment, but
Yeah.
sure enough, going so great that 2 years you've now even adopted it into your own daily routine because you have some tools and some equipment that you can use at home. And so, just speaking to the falls, if you have muscle, when you fall, your muscle is going to act as a cushion. And then two, if you're not doing the resistance training, the only way to build the bone density and try to avoid potentially this osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, and things of that is to do the strength training. You have to involve yourself in some sort of resistance training program. And that's where, depending on the year that you were born, we may still are having the myth in our mind. It's totally been busted, hopefully, at this point. But to lift weights and, quote, look like a man or look bulky requires a very specific routine and a very structured nutrition plan that goes with that.
Right.
That is not commonplace. Those women that you see on stages winning awards for those physique shows,
Yeah, that's
they,
like 5 years and 5,000 calories a day.
and it's a very extreme
Right.
end of the spectrum. It's not the common. In fact, that's why I get excited, because sometimes when I do go to, say, a public gym and work out by myself, I now see a lot more young women in the gym that are interested in wanting to create tone, because we're hearing this more and more that the more muscle I have, the more that's going to create the sense of vitality, right? If I have it now, then it's very hard to lose muscle. Like once you build it, it's kind of like you got it. And it's only if you, say, were to end up in like a hospital bed where you were immobile for many weeks at a time, would your body then start catabolizing on that protein on your muscle and taking it as its fuel source. Otherwise, you just might go on vacation for a couple weeks and just be a little deconditioned. But as soon as you come back and get back into your routine, it's not like somehow you're going to lose like 5 pounds of muscles just because you go to Hawaii for 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing with that is even if you are, God forbid, in a car wreck and you're hospitalized for 3 weeks, there are actually strategies that you can use to mitigate that sarcopenia or that deconditioning. I mean, you may not be as, quick and agile as you were laying in a bed for 3 weeks, but there's all kinds of aminos that you can take on a regular basis if you were hospitalized and able, to swallow capsules or even a powder, you can still use that and hold on to that muscle. And that kind of leads me to the next thing. I've used a lot of amino acids and I feel like that gives me a little bit of an extra edge. What do you have to say about using amino acids for working out? As
I think it's a great sort of supplement. That's still dependent on the person, because I'll just say that not all amino acids taste great. Sometimes you have to find like the right brand, but that and or creatine, especially, we see now more and more studies that are showing that females, especially in our later years, especially if I have someone who maybe they struggle getting enough protein into their diet. So
Mhm.
yes, I definitely agree that that's a great supplement to have on
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah, definitely one that is more focused on leucine. And we'll put some notes and some links to our favorite ones. I have a couple that I use with my patients routinely that I have vetted and used myself for years, and they are really helpful. And like she was saying, sometimes they don't taste so great, but this particular brand I do like, and they do have different flavors. But if you absolutely cannot stand stuff like that, they also come in capsules, which is wonderful. And even if you're doing the powder at home, let's say you're traveling or you're out for the day, you can always take the capsules with you. So there's always a way to make it work, is my point.
If you really are focused on wanting to build muscle, I mean, again, amino acids, we're talking about the building blocks. Like
Yeah.
this is literally what contributes to actually making a muscle grow, if you will. And so it's very vital. And you guys already talked about nutrition. Of course, I'd probably be wanting to get a little bit more into it. But again, depending on what you're doing nutritionally, you
Yeah.
may need this as an adjunct, and so that's why it can be very dependent on the person too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just bringing this back around to metabolism and weight loss, especially that midsection that we start getting doughy and thick around the middle section. What I can say with you in particular that I've noticed not only in myself, but with the clients that I've sent you is when we are strength training, and I just want to bring this home, we are building that real estate, those muscles, arms, legs, back, what have you, that are mopping up that excess glucose and lipids, so that that fat oxidation, we have this place for these things to go rather than in the bloodstream and circulating and making us more insulin resistant, which we tend to be as we get older. We actually reverse that. We create that real estate that will actually counteract excess glucose and lipids. So it's been a valuable experience for me. And I know that everyone that's come to see you has enjoyed their time with you, of course, because you're always fun and funny, and we always have a good time. But in addition to that, it's just like I want to bring that point home about not only the strength and the healing of the physiology, but also that confidence aspect, walking taller, feeling better. Because as we're aging and we're feeling maybe, I don't look like that 30-year-old version of myself anymore. We need these little extra things, to pump our confidence up, to stand up tall, to walk with confidence into a room or a board meeting or whatever it is that you're doing in your life, walk into your kid's room just to have a little bit of authority about you. I think that strength training is a really great way to accomplish that. So,
Yeah.
anything else you want to add or talk about today that would help our audience with getting into the next steps of this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, it's never too late to start. I've worked with a lot of people that are 55 plus, 60, and never have I had anybody ever regret getting started, even if it was later than what's ideal. Obviously, the earlier you start, the better, because you're building that foundation. The goal is to really, hopefully, one day it's weaved into your life where it is a lifestyle, it becomes a part of you. It's not something that you have to do, but something that you look forward to doing. And if you sometimes struggle, what do women do best is it's usually calling in a buddy. A lot of times I really coach some of my clients on trying to find some sort of other accountability partner outside of myself to help bring them into it and create that camaraderie so that the two of you can both be cheering each other on. So you don't have to go at it alone. And again, don't be comparing yourself to your spouse or anything like that, but find someone that wants to get started. If that's as simple as signing up for a 5K and you decide that all you're going to do is walk it, that's also fine, but it's something that's in the future. You can then start creating some sort of strategic way to get yourself there. That's why they have the couch to 5K or whatever that challenge is that some people do. So yeah, it's never too late to start. And maybe even just like you said on the lipids, that we consume these calories, we eat this food, it is for energy, but we also need to utilize it in some sort of way. So I want to always empower people. I don't like sometimes when people say, well, you're getting older, so you got to slow down. That's the exact opposite. I think the mindset should be that I'm stepping into another phase of my life. So that's going to require a different sort of input to this phase. It's not, it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul, but obviously what we did before may not be working for us. So your body usually, what I like to think of it as, your body's actually just crying out for something different. It wants change, and the body enjoys novel and new things. Your brain and your body are very much connected in that they wants these new things. The idea of learning through the language of movement is a sage old thing that will never go out of style, no matter if you're 1 years old or 75. It's always going to feel good to be trying to sort of solve this new puzzle, but like a movement puzzle, or like you and I did a couple times. Sometimes it's just about creating a task, like how fast can you get to the wall and touch it? And then can you throw that ball through the hoop? And can you jump over this thing right here? Making it more of just something that's more engaging at times too. I've got clients that like Zumba, they like dance classes. It's like, I'm always like, hey, if you like it, do it. Don't necessarily make yourself, do something that you absolutely dislike, but
Yeah.
there's still a level of being willing to get out of your comfort zone, at least in the beginning. But the reward of that comes so easily that you start developing that intrinsic motivation, because as soon as you kind of stop, and I'm sure you could speak to that, you kind of feel like you're a little out of sorts. And then as soon as you come back to it, you're like, oh my gosh, you know what? I do love this strength training thing, because I stopped for like a week or two and I just feel right. And so you actually start to crave it once you can really get into it and see it through.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You do crave it. And going back to what you said about it's never too late, and be careful what you say about aging. Your word is your wand. I heard that said once. And so I think if you're just like around people that are not uplifting and motivating, and yeah, aging sucks and this is this way and blah blah blah, that's the kind of reality you're going to create. But if you see someone like Coach Paige, who's like fun and upbeat, and she's going to get you motivated, you're not even going to feel like you're working out. I mean, you almost forget that you're there to do that. You're just in it, and you're feeling good, and you're feeling stronger, and you want to do better, and you want to upgrade your experience every time you go because it just feels good. Again, not just in one way, but in multiple ways. So I think what you do is such a great and beautiful service for your clients and the community. And I want to tell people how they can reach out to you because I know that you do virtual consultations. So even if somebody's in Maine or Iowa or Washington, they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you can go to www.infinityhealthcoach.com. You should be able to find my contact info very easily on my website, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time and all of your information. I'm sure everyone else does too. And with that, I will bid you adieu.
Thank you. My pleasure, Heather.
Take care.